Africa has enough food. That's not debatable. Africa can feed itself and even the rest of the world. That's also not debatable. What's debatable is how come Africa has been unable to get itself out of this intractable problem of food insufficiency. That's what VSA will be looking at today. I'm Sulaiman. Welcome. You know, across sub-Saharan Africa, very few countries can boast of half of their population being food secure. Almost half of early child death in Africa is caused by hunger and starvation. When these people manage to feed, they don't feed on nutritious foods, further leaving their lives in danger. Water has become scarce owing to drought, and many of these underprivileged Africans, as you can see, can't boast of pipe-borne water in their backyards. Now, there's also the risk of insecurity sending people out of their homes and away from their farmlands. In Nigeria's northeast, farmers get killed on their farmlands. Gunshots have become a scarecrow and farmers need protection to work. Solutions are the ultimate now, and governments need to see this as an emergency. Joining me again on Village Square is, well, you know, we have a whole lot of people. We'll be going to Gerald Masila, Executive Director, Eastern African Grain Council, and of course, Mosunmola Umoru both join me on the program to talk about this intractable, problem. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. So if the imported genetically modified crops are not fit for Africa, Mosunmola, how can the yields of locally produced crops be improved upon, since you are one of Africa's big-time farmers? Well, I think, well, Wilson, if you can hear me, Mosunmola, this looks like we're having a bit of, connection issues getting to you wherever you are at the moment. We have Gerald, and of course, Mosunmola, Gerald is joining us from... You can hear me. That's good. So we're looking at locally produced crops, on the continent, and asking how this can be improved upon, especially imported genetically modified crops that are not fit for the continent.
Thank you for having me again on your show. I'm excited to be here to talk about my favorite topic in the world, which is nutrition, food production, and improved livelihoods for both our farmers and citizens at large. We can improve and enhance our productivity right now by educating more people on food production. The quality of the food produce that moves to our market is largely being produced by smallholder farmers. We have a lot of people participating, but for us to be able to migrate away from getting into the trouble where we are consuming unsavory, unwholesome food, it narrows down to education. Education. It also includes the support, and I would like to highlight this because we don't talk enough. People talk about it, but from a different perspective. So I like to talk about subsidizing food production by government as a whole. Globally, food production, agricultural practices is subsidized by government. But in Nigeria, it's a bit tough. I mean, and I'll use Nigeria as a reference point. We're not getting sufficient subsidy for the farmers, and many of our farmers are not enlightened enough to know the difference between the GMO seeds that can put them in trouble and wholesome seeds. So it narrows down to education, both from the seed manufacturers, the seed banks, and our farmers.
You know, that's a very important aspect you've raised, and you said, yes, that's an important aspect you've raised, talking about education. Just yesterday on the show, we spoke, about the extension workers, and now today we have people like yourself helping, small-time farmers get up, and running. Tell us some of those concerns or some of the challenges you face when you go out to speak to farmers around the continent, specifically in Nigeria.
I have to tell you that one of the biggest challenges we face today, it's the biggest hurdle, is even getting to the farmers safe. How do we ensure safety of extension service providers, the safety of investors like myself who are willing to move into these rural communities whereby our kidnap rate and ransom rate seems to be on the rise, and we have bandits and headsmen crises around most of our communities, and it's not restricted and limited to the north. So security is the most critical challenge we're facing today. We need to get there alive to even be able to engage and interact with the farmers. That's number one. We also have infrastructure deficits. We cannot underscore the infrastructure gap and deficit in Nigeria today. Until 2 weeks ago, when my family was able to travel by rail to Ibadan, we will typically spend going to our site in Oyo. I will typically spend 5 to 8 hours driving from Lagos to Ibadan to go to one of the communities we work. And I mean Ibadan, I'm not even mentioning the community where we are investing in currently. So those are challenges, the road access, the security, and like you rightly mentioned in your intro, I have to applaud, is the fact that we do not have access, in some of those communities, they still do not have access to good water sources for them to even sustain their own lives. There's power gaps. They do not have access to power. So we're beginning to look critically at off-the-grid power sources. We're talking to small companies that can provide off-power, solar, alternate power sources in some of the communities. And I would shock you that it would cost us typically per site, it would cost between 5 to 40 million naira to power a location today in Nigeria. You're either using generator, which would be between 3.5 to 5 to 6 million for a 10 kVA diesel generator. But if you want to do solar integration, we're spending between 15 to 38 million naira per site. So that is a heavy financial requirement to set up power and meet that gap. So you're generating your own power, you're generating your own water, you're buying your own inputs and seeds, you're doing your land prep yourself, you're providing your own security, you're typically a local government chairperson per investor. So, and then we have public office holders who occupy those offices, and all the way to do at the end of every month or every business year is send you a tax. They haven't contributed nothing to the survival of your venture, to the survival of your own direct business, producing food.
I just hope
all the smallholder farmers you work with, there are no real tax incentives available that won't.
Let me
you were going to say something.
Yes, let me come in here, and I hope that because sometime I think we lose connection from some of those things you highlighted. It's important you've been able to say some very critical issues here you've raised, talking about education, talking about the non-availability of some, incentive from the government, and worse still, protection of farmers is very key here. For instance, Ghana and Ivory Coast stopped Hershey from sourcing for cocoa for a while in their country because farmers were being exploited. So do African food crop producers have such protection from governments?
At the moment, I would not say that beyond Ghana, in Nigeria, for example, there's no real protection for the farmers from exploitation. A few groups are coming together to collaborate to set up some boards that look into advocating. We have the Abidjan group in Nigeria. We have the Nigerian Agribusiness Group as well. We do have Poultry Farmers Association. But when you talk about that, largely to say that the policies are directly looking into farmers' protection, we do not have a lot of that with strength. In fact, on the contrary, what we do have is a policy environment that actually hinders and hampers farmers' growth and productivity. And I'll give you a typical example. If I'm bringing farm inputs into Nigeria for maybe live vaccines, maybe semen for artificial insemination, the norm in other climes is that those samples will get good through passage from customs as they land off an aircraft, and they will be shipped to my farm real time to ensure that I do not lose the viability of some of those inputs. But in Nigeria, you're subjected to the same scrutiny by the customs to get those inputs out of the ports. Nowhere in the world should that happen, but it happens here on our shores, and those are things that we need to look at. You have foreign companies come in and just harvest and buy produce at prices that work for them and sometimes work for the direct farmers, but no one is regulating, no one is protecting investors locally. Rather, we are working to protect ourselves, to ensure that we find market sources to push our produce to. So those are things we need to begin to look at closely. And people like myself are now beginning to talk to other farmers to see how we can collaborate effectively to engage government in a manner that protects not just the investor, but not the large investors, but the smallholder farmers in Nigeria, in a manner that they're not exploited by large manufacturing companies across the globe. Because
sorry, I'll come back to you, Mosunmola. I'll come back to you. Let me quickly go to Nairobi, Kenya, where Gerald Masila joins me. He's the executive director of the Eastern African Grain Council. Gerald, we started this conversation on VSA yesterday, and some have been asking questions, follow-up questions we received from Africans who watched. If we are capable, is the continent capable of feeding itself?
Thank you very much for having me on the show again. I think to answer your question where you are asking, is Africa capable of feeding itself? The answer is a straight yes. Africa is capable of feeding itself. Africa has adequate arable land to feed itself, and it has everything that is required for us to produce sufficient food, not only to feed ourselves, but to export to the rest of the world.
So isn't it baffling that some African countries export food, and people are wondering how come we haven't actually done enough to take care of the continent before looking outside the continent?
So that's one of the challenges we are facing, where when we look at the agroecological regions around Africa, and you look at what we can produce in different parts of Africa, you realize that we do have a lot and we produce a lot. The limitation is that we are not able to move food from where it's produced to where it needs to be consumed, principally because trade in food and cross-border trade particularly has been a difficulty, where you will find many countries in Africa trade more in food with countries outside Africa than with countries inside Africa. Mm-hmm. And you find alignments in trade relations following the old colonial sort of arrangements, where former French colonies will be sending a lot of food and buying a lot of food from France, and the British colonies will be more connected to Britain and Belgium and so on and so forth. And so you will find that there are all those influences from out Africa that undermine the efforts of Africa to trade more with itself and to move food from producing regions in Africa to regions that need to consume.
Well, we'll take a moment. We'll come back because some of the key things raised by Mosunmola here in Nigeria, I want you to also, react and tell us if this, resonates with farmers in Kenya. That will be when we return. You just joined us. You're welcome to VSA here on News Central. We still have the Executive Director of Harvesters Farm, Mosunmola Umoru. And of course, we have Gerald Masila, the Executive Director of the East African Grain Council. Now, we're looking to fixing some of these things. And Gerald, before I come back to you, I want Mosunmola to speak more about some of those key challenges she raised. And it has to do with leadership, because the farmer on the continent, according to her, seemed to be all out, all alone, getting to, till the soil, make and even get the produce out of the farmland, and without maybe little or no help from the government. Tell us more, Mosunmola. We saw what happened in Nigeria's northeast, where some rice farmers were killed in their farmlands. Is that the case in other parts of Nigeria, like the southwest, where you have some of your farms?
So, it's pathetic to say that we have come to this point where farmers are being slain from time to time, and they just become statistics. They're just numbers. There's no real time protection for farmers. In some of the states in the Southwest where we do have investment, currently there are a few initiatives by the Southwestern governors, like the Amotekun Squad that was recently inaugurated. But to a very large extent, most of the farmers have to provide their own security on their farms for their workers. So lives are being threatened on a daily basis. And then we have the headers who do know the cattle routes, the old grazing cattle routes from the north down to the southwest, and they do migrate through those parts, and they feel threatened by the presence of citizens and investors who do not, and there's a language barrier. So for those of us who do not have Hausa Fulanis or northern members of staff working for us in our workforce, it's difficult to engage. So they feel threatened. They're looking for food for their cattle. They're looking for water for their animals, their livestock. And they're used to migrating. They're used to moving around. But they also have some degree of militia knowledge. And that's why there's a bit of a convolution or a conflict where people in the South, people are concerned, is this a northern agenda or is this a real clamor for survival? So we do experience that. Over the last 5 to 6 weeks, I must say there have been a lot of attacks within some of the communities where we work, from non-directly on my farm, to be very honest, but colleagues have had some CEOs shot and killed. I've had two friends whose farms were invaded, cattle were rustled, workers were attacked, and even religious households not too far from the farms had women raped and farmers injured, workers injured. So that's the current reality, I have to admit, that we're facing. Some of us are being forced to actually pay for escorted security per time.
Let me bring in Gerald here. Sorry to cut you again. Let me bring in Gerald here because Gerald, what Mosunmola has just painted is a very, gloomy situation where in Nigeria most of the farmers are not safe. Is that the case in parts of or any part of Kenya?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the topic of security and safety of the farmers working out in the farms is a concern in a number of other African countries, even within Eastern Africa. If you look at countries like South Sudan, where you have a very good arable land, you have got very good rainfall, equatorial forest and all that, but there's not much production coming out of there simply because of insecurity that makes the farmers not be able to be present to till their lands because of security issues. And there are various other parts of Eastern Africa where that has been a concern, but we want to laud the governments of this region, particularly under the IGAD initiative, which has gone a long way in providing cross-border peace with peacekeeping forces, and with a lot of efforts that have been put to enhance peace and security so that food production can be increased. But when you look at some countries like DRC Congo, there are some parts of DRC Congo that are very, very active, but farmers have not been able to produce because of security concerns. So yes, I would like to echo that fact that security and peace are basic necessity to ensure we are able to do production, and is a responsibility of the leaders to ensure that they deliver peace to the poor. Thank you.
There's something Mosunmola mentioned. Let me make it clear. She mentioned a word, Amoteku, and that's a local, security outfit by the governors of Nigeria's southwestern states. Is there any similar, attempt at providing such kinds of security locally for farmers in Kenya?
Thank you for the question. So in Kenya, we have the evolved government system that came in with the new constitution of 2010. But how the governance situation is that there are some aspects that were devolved and other aspects that were not devolved. So security is one of those aspects that is not yet a devolved function, although agriculture and agriculture production is a devolved function. So for the simple fact that security is handled by the national government, so you wouldn't find situations where a local governor or a local leader would be taking the initiatives to sort of enhance security in their areas, because security is handled and provided by the national government. So in Kenya, the situation is different to that extent. Thank you very much.
I bring you back, Mosunmola. You are also a nutrition expert. You've gone around talking about the kind of yields that farmers should produce, especially on the continent. Many African nations depend on agricultural yields, usually food crops, as a source of foreign exchange earnings. And in the absence of local satisfaction, foreign income becomes even thinner. So Mosunmola, I actually wanted your reaction to that.
Well, so current. I lost the last part of your question.
No, I said, many African nations basically depend on agricultural yields, usually crops, as a source of foreign exchange earnings. That's in the absence of local satisfaction, and foreign income has become even thinner. How has that been for farmers, especially in Nigeria, getting the foreign, incentive or currency to help them further, especially in exportation and importation of some of these high yields seedlings?
You will know that 2020 was a very traumatic year for us globally, and most businesses or traders in commodities that would usually export, all aviation network was grounded, and no one was really shipping anything anywhere, and most borders were shut. As a result, they have to authoritatively say there hasn't been a lot of earnings in terms of foreign exchange. In fact, on the contrary, what we are experiencing right now is that more firms are beginning to look at sourcing and selling their produce locally. And that's why I think that the AFTA agreement may be a very timely decision on the part of our nations on the continent, because if we begin to, like the other guest mentioned, we do a lot of international trade with the EU, with the UK, and even as far as the Americas, over trading on the continent within countries on the continent. So with this recent trend where most of the producers could not move produce abroad to Europe and the likes, where people are beginning to think out of the box around or even go to the eastern part of Africa. So everyone is beginning to think out of the box at this critical time. We're all looking for innovative ways to sell our produce, and also begin to think about further processing our local products into finished commodities that can be sold in country.
Absolutely.
As opposed to dependent on exports.
So we'll take a moment. When we come back, we'll be on our home stretch talking about some of those processing. You talked about Moso as well as storage, and see how this can lead to something bountiful for the African farmer. That's when we return. Well, Mosunmola in Lagos, Nigeria, and Gerald in Nairobi, Kenya, still with us, and we're talking about food on the continent. There's no doubt that Africa needs more resilient crops and storage systems even. Do we think it's advisable to seek a public-private partnership in the areas of storage, research, and value addition? This to you, Gerald, first.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So you're quite right in that those two key concerns, one of processing, being able to process what we produce, add value to what we produce, preserve it so that it doesn't get spoiled and lost soon after harvest, is obviously a very important aspect. And connected to that is also solutions around storage, where when you go to most rural parts of Africa, the old granaries that we used to have that would store food from one season to the other and preserve it from pests and other kind of rodents is not very much available nowadays. And therefore, there is need to, first of all, do good research that can give us methods that can preserve our food, that can value our food, to our food. And this is a challenge to our researchers, to our young scientists coming up, to see to it that we come up with new technologies that can help us to preserve, to process our foods, to add value to our foods after harvesting. And on the side of storage, there is need to come up with big, good storage solutions. For example, storage silos for grains at a national level, at a community level. And this is why AGC has been promoting the warehouse receipt system as one of the solutions that provides both storage, allows the food that has been stored to be security for the farmer to borrow, do a short-term borrowing using that food that is in a store as a collateral, as a security for their short-term loan. And we are glad that quite a number of countries in Africa have adopted warehouse receipt systems. They have passed the act, they have established the various regulators to regulate the warehouse receipt system. In Kenya, the warehouse receipt system was established and is up and running, and we are quite glad that farmers will be able to have that opportunity to deposit their produce in a certified warehouse, get a warehouse receipt, use it to a bank, go to a bank using it, and take a short-term borrowing to meet immediate needs. And this will be unlocking the value of the food when it is still in the warehouse. We've seen other countries like Malawi, like Zambia, like Ghana, also promoting and coming in with warehouse receipting system and promoting structured trading in the grains and cereal sector. So yes, both aspects are very important, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of research, in terms of invention and new interventions. Thank you very much.
Mosunmola, this sounds pretty much more like what you highlighted before Gerald joined us. You also mentioned, you talked about electricity, which is power, especially for those who deal in perishable and livestock. Tell us how this has been for farmers in Nigeria. Well, I think I seem to have lost that connection with Mosunmola. I hope, well, we get to reconnect with her. I'll come back to you, Gerald. You know, the thing here has to do with, you know, sometimes perishable, you know, produce, which is very, very important. And of course, crops that can be found irrespective of season. You know, only in some African countries you get to see what we call seasonal crops. Does it also bother you that farmers should start working to ensuring that these crops can be found, you know, any time of the year? Thank you. That's an issue that is something we need to address quite keenly, because one of the challenges that affects the agriculture markets is issue you have raised of zonality in production, availability, supply of produce, so that a lot of the seasonal kind of crops that have one time of harvesting, and during that harvest, you have a big abundant supply, which then by the laws of economic laws of demand and supply, when you have this huge supply coming in, it leads to a crash in the prices, which then makes the returns for the farmers go down. And so if we would be able to address that seasonality issue by ensuring and availing the commodities, the food crops, throughout the year, and evening out the season by coming in with solutions such as storage solutions, and even for non-grain foods like the other perishables like fruits and vegetables, coming up with
with storage solutions, with green energy, using solar systems to have cold storage solutions that can preserve and keep these foods available over a longer period, and therefore we even out that curve, that supply curve. Then it would do a lot in stabilizing prices, in improving returns and on investments to the farmers, and also ensuring that consumers have availability of their various food commodities at more or less affordable prices across the year and over the various seasons. Yeah, so yes, I do agree that coming up with solutions to even the supply curve and reduce that volatility, something that go along in improving returns in agriculture and agribusiness. Thank you very much.
You know, Gerald, once upon a time, when people talk about farmers on the continent, we're talking about our grandparents. It's an exciting moment for the continent, seeing pretty young people coming into, agricultural business. Perhaps tell us, how has it been, with your council, speaking to encouraging younger persons to look towards farming?
Well, yeah, that's a very good observation, because indeed, do remember in one of the occasions here where we had a big fund and we had the head of state in, and statistics were shared, which showed that the average age of the farmer was something like 60 years. And that was a wake-up call to almost everyone, because with an aging farmer population, with the farmers becoming a much older population, I think that's a question or an issue of concern. And indeed, efforts have to be made so that we can attract the youth into agriculture. And to do this, there are various solutions we can look at. For us at the East Africa Grain Council, one of the things we are doing to make farming a lot more interesting, a lot more attractive to the youth for investment and all that. First of all, we are doing a lot of work investing in data and knowledge systems. Secondly, we've developed quite a number of ICT solutions and digital applications that appeal more to the youth, so that you can use that and get to do the agriculture with a lot more knowledge. Thirdly, we are also promoting the use of technology, of machineries, and basically mechanizing agriculture, so that it's not a laborious process of carrying the hoe and the djembe, so that we are able to utilize nice new tractors and handheld and other useful implements that can use technology, that can be powered, that can make it easier to work around the farms, and that can attract the youth. One space that the youth are claiming in the agriculture value chain is in the post-harvest, where we've been supporting them to invest in things like shellers, things like dryers, things like thresher, and we get this youth going out to offer these services to the farmers, in terms of then being able to provide that service as an income generating activity, and something that is a lot more attractive to the youth. Other interesting developments that are attracting the youth are some of the new things, like I don't know whether you have heard about the new technologies of insect farming, where you are able to grow or to farm insects, and then when you farm these insects, you get a byproduct that you can use to blend to make animal feeds. And one example I can give you is the black soldier flies that the youth are picking up quite a lot, and getting into utilizing waste from markets and using this waste to grow the black soldier flies, and then using those to supply to animal feed manufacturers. And it's something that you're able to do with a very high level of technology input in processing, in blending, in drying, and packaging. And so we are glad that all not doom and gloom, and that we are seeing quite a number of youth investing and coming into agriculture and doing agriculture quite differently from the way their fathers and their grandparents did agriculture, and this is quite encouraging for us at EHGC.
It is indeed encouraging, and this is where I bring in Mosunmola, because Mosunmola, you actually started farming pretty young, and I asked Gerald, how has it been encouraging younger persons on the continent to take to farming, as we have seen lately from persons like yourself? Once upon a time, it's only our grandparents who go to farm. When you say a farmer, you're looking to see someone in his 60s and 70s. How embracing is this profession for the young on the continent?
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you, Mosunmola.
Okay, so we're in very interesting times. I'm sorry about the breaking connectivity. It's from the location where I'm currently situated, but I have to say that it's never been a more exciting time for one to be alive and to see some of the innovations come to play in the agricultural sector. And I like the references Gerald made around farming insects and all of the technologies that have been adopted for urban farming, producing of food in urban areas, and using, and the most recent one is actually leveraging technology further around drones, digital farm mapping, land mapping, getting actual topography and layout of the farm. It's a very exciting time. Gone are the days when agriculture, agribusiness used to be looked and viewed upon through the lens of drudgery and poverty and pain. With the use of drones these days, you find a lot more young people engaging in the space. With the use of technology, we're also beginning to see a new entrance of a new cadre of young people drive resources and especially financial resources for expanding agricultural investment and the terrains within the agricultural climate. This wasn't so. It was usually the preserve of the elderly. Many people retire into agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the investors either had to be retirees or past government officials who've had a lot of exposure and funding, access to capital in the financial markets. But today the trends are changing. We're beginning to see a lot more investment around cold storage facilities. We're beginning to see large corporate, like in Nigeria, companies like FedEx, Red Star, invest in cold refrigerated trucks to actually move fresh produce across the country. We're beginning to see indigenous investors, especially young people, come into the transportation space. We're beginning to see more people come into input marketing. We're then beginning to see a lot of value addition at the bottom of the pyramid, where we're taking coconuts and making candies, we're taking fresh vegetables and making dry snacks out of them, and giving very healthy options to the populace. We're also beginning to see a new advent of investment around organic farming production. So even though there's a clamor for commercial production of food, lifestyles are changing. And then with the surge of COVID, we're also, as you know, Africa, Nigeria, if I may boast, perhaps the immune capital of the world. We still, despite all the speculations and projections and assumptions that people will be dropping dead on the streets of Nigeria and Africa as a whole, you would see that our COVID death numbers are still the lowest globally. As a result, it means that there's something we're doing right, and you narrow it down partially to our nutrition. So our food sources are still not as destroyed as bad as people like to project. Yes, we may not be eating like the Western world. We may not have sufficient buying power, but our citizens are eating a lot more safe, wholesome food. And And that's beginning to promote a new cadre of entrepreneurs in that space, making fresh fruit juices, fresh healthy snack options, and also creating, so new retail chains are coming up also in the market space. So there are huge opportunities across the value chain, from primary production, from seed production, to be honest, to primary production of the food, to distribution, packaging. Many more companies are focusing on packaging of packaging materials for food, which used to be one of the deterrents for us to actually play in the European market. People are beginning to be a bit more creative when leveraging technology, and we're also being able to track our production to market today, leveraging technology as well. So there's a lot of exciting activities ongoing behind the scene. We're not promoting them enough. We need people like you to help us tell our stories. And many people are also beginning to leverage new media.
We should absolutely. Sorry to cut you there. We should also be thankful to yourself, Mosunmola and Gerald, honestly, for helping the continent, especially providing technology, providing key knowledge, information that will help farmers know that this is an all-important venture, and of course to also encourage younger persons to come in. I had the smile on my face the moment Mosunmola mentioned the coconut candies, one of my favorites. Anyway, so food and water, they say, is life. In the absence of the two most important instruments to healthy living, you can tell the problem many Africans are facing. So solutions are being sought. That is why both of you have come on the show today. And well, we need to be seen to be addressing, the problems in earnest. I'd like to thank both of you for being such nice company on the show. All through the week, we'll be talking about food security here on the continent. So Mosunmola Umoru, many thanks. And Gerald Masila, many thanks for joining us, even in transit there in Nairobi, Kenya. Don't forget, you can join us live on the go at youtube.com/News Central TV and on Star Times in Nigeria, channels 274. I'm Sulaiman. I'll see you tomorrow.